to kick off, I would love to hear Alex and MG's thoughts on why the GIF has been a lasting format over the years and why it's becoming increasingly popular. Alex recently shared a stat that billions of GIFs are shared per day using Giffy's tools.
You want me to talk about this?
I think I'd be curious what you think about the whole thing.
Yeah, GIFs are interesting, Alex. All you have to do is look at my Twitter feed, I think, and you'll see that of my level of interest in GIFs. And if you happen to sort of log into any of the various social networks that I'm on messaging services, it's pretty much dominated by GIFs these days. The occasional stickers here and there, but the GIF format has sort of taken over as the emotive way to say something without having to say anything. And you built that.
Yeah, so a couple things why GIFs are super popular right now. So there's nothing really special about GIFs. If you think about what people are doing in messaging, they're just trying to communicate expression and emotion and kind of get ideas across. We've been doing this since writing. We've been doing it since movies came out. Anytime you quote a movie, remember that guy, everyone has a friend that quotes Fast Times at Ridgemont High or some dude movie. And everyone has been using references to pop culture as a way to kind of explain what they're saying, to kind of add some kind of expression and more information to how to express themselves. And only in the last 10 years has the technology been there where we can take movie clips or we can take audio clips and put them into messaging or put them into the ways that we communicate with other people. So before we used to use text, that was really popular. And I mean, if you think about it, it was only maybe 6 years ago that the ability to cut a clip and actually put it into messaging and have it render on a phone was possible. So when the iPhone was the first phone that I know of that was able to do that in messaging. And when that took off, that opened up this whole range of expression. So people have been wanting to do this ever since we started communicating, expressing themselves more. And GIFs just allow them to send more information. And GIFs are just the start. You'll start seeing all types of different media flood into all the messaging apps. So stickers are one case. Anything that adds expression. And GIFs just happen to have been, from a backward hack, supported by every browser because of the 80s standard. And so that's why we're just taking advantage of it right now.
And I receive a lot of animal GIFs, which I'm a fan of. I'm curious what types of topics are really popular in GIFs today, and what types of patterns are you seeing in how people are using your tools?
So you think it would be cat GIFs and funny memes. It's actually not what most of the GIFs are sent on the internet that we found. So that's when we knew that this was a different thing. So most of the GIFs, 80% of all the GIFs sent are TVs, celebrities, sports. They're entertainment-based. Cats and other things are pretty popular, but most of it is branded, kind of high-end produced content. And you ask yourself, why is that? And it's really if you think about movies, cinema has been around for 100 years. There's been millions of dollars put into producing this 3-second shot, right? There's entire film crews. If you were from New York, there's $1 million and 1,000 people there to make this one really high-end piece of 3 seconds that express something really interesting about human understanding and expression. And now that we have the tools to chop it up, of course we're sending these around. We're sending little tiny movies around that are literally millions of dollars of content. So that ends up being the most popular thing. Live events, the Grammys, Oscars, we just did something with the Grammys, and all the GIFs that we made with the Grammys got 175 million views. We have an official, sports is really big. We have an official partnership with pretty much every sports league, NFL, NBA, NASCAR, UFC. We did the NFL halftime show. It beat out the Facebook views. I think Facebook had something like 50 million views on all the videos, and all the GIFs from the halftime show did 75 million views, which is pretty impressive. So we are seeing anything you see in TV, people are starting to watch in GIFs. It's the meme part is just a small minority of all of it.
MG, the communication space can change really rapidly, and you've invested in a number of communication companies, Slack, Medium. Why is communication an interesting space to be in as an investor right now?
I mean, I think that's sort of up for debate. Always going forward, things ebb and flow, things come into and out of sort of popularity. But I do think, right now in particular with the messaging space, it's finally gotten to the point where things are more robust, I guess. And there's these networks: Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, WeChat, everything else on down the line, Slack, certainly on the business side, that are becoming actual platforms themselves. And so that being able to open up for other businesses to be able to build on top of them, I think is a really interesting opportunity, obviously, in the startup space. And now that these guys are all at sort of a volume where they can actually be these platforms, that's what makes them most interesting.
And could you talk a little bit about, when you first discovered Giffy and what made it an appealing investment?
Yeah, so it was actually around the time that we were looking at the investment in Slack a few years ago, and sort of doing our homework and doing diligence and sort of looking at how various companies, and certainly a lot of the companies within the GV portfolio, were using Slack on a growing basis to do a lot of their day-to-day work, and sort of noticing how many of them were not only using Slack, but they were using Giffy a lot within Slack, because there was, of course, the /Giffy command. That's one of the more popular ones, I think, within Slack that people were using to be able to communicate in various different channels, certainly some of the more fun channels. And so when I started to see that over and over again, and then sort of that trickling out to various other sort of social networks and some of the messaging apps that we were talking about, it just seemed like this is a really interesting sort of service that's finally bringing together, as Alex noted, like a format that's been around for a long, long time, but has finally sort of come into its own because it can be used now in a communication format.
Yeah, one of the things, you should see our Slack channels. They're kind of crazy.
I don't want to see the Slack channels.
Pretty much there's like 100% GIFs, and we have all these we have this whole like weird internal GIF culture that we'll explain someday. It's kind of weird. GIF bullying will be a thing of the future. Just, you heard it here first. So it's pretty bad, but it's kind of funny. So one of the things that we see with communication is this is one of the trends, I think, that goes along with Slack and Giffy and why that's happening. We've noticed this big trend: AT&T, Time Warner, Verizon, Yahoo. It's really when communication companies are merging with content companies. The people are on communication platforms, but they're lacking the content. And the content is lacking the communications. That's like Giffy and Slack. What we've seen is, if you think about what is the current trend that's going on with the major companies, think about Snapchat. On the left is communication with messaging. On the right is discovery with entertainment. And they're trying to bridge the two in the middle. Same thing with Facebook. They have an entire communication network, social network. And now Facebook TV is their take on bringing entertainment into that and merging the two. So the general trend that you're going to see is every communication platform is going to need content. And they're going to figure out where do they get the content and inject it into the communication space. Every content company is going to need communication. So they're going to reach out and try to figure out who the people are that they can partner with to get into communications or build it themselves. And you see this with Twitter. You see this with every platform. This is the big macro trend we're seeing. On the GIF front, most people think that GIFs are 100% expression. And expression search is something that we used like 5 years ago that we just kind of made up. And expression is there, but the other part that people don't really see is 50% of all the people that come to watch GIFs aren't using them for expression at all. They're just using it for straight entertainment. They're using it to replace, when we did the VMAs with MTV, we got more views on the GIFs than all of the video combined, like a factor of 10, because no one really wanted to watch the VMAs. They just wanted to watch all the GIFs that came from it in the moments. So as an entertainment platform, it ends up being about really like 50% of the time. We calculated we serve about 4 million hours of entertainment content a day. And so if you're talking about the amount of hours put into short-form entertainment, really GIFs are it's this one format that allows you to do communication and entertainment. And that is where all the other companies you see are kind of merging towards.
And I think to sort of riff off of that, of like, you were asking about when we look at it from an investment perspective, back at when I was at CrunchFund still, we had invested in, that initial sort of Vine, when Vine was still a startup before Twitter acquired it. And looking back to that product, it was obviously very short form, also looping sort of short video. And the notion there, which I think sort of points to where Giffy actually is getting to right now, is the notion that obviously everyone knows that attention spans seem to be declining, but it's like that's always said in sort of a negative way, but I think that there are positive effects of that, and I think that there are tools and sort of different types of formats that arise because of just the changing nature of the way that we consume these things. And so whereas there was Vine, RIP Vine, now there is, we're moving more into sort of the world of GIFs, and that being able to, even though it seems almost comically short, when people are watching them for entertainment purposes, and also to sort of gather information about like what is going on right now.
Yeah, big fans of Vine. Bummer. But that said, it really is about, what we're seeing is, so this is kind of like how we're describing what we're seeing. There's this primetime section of time between 7 and 10 p.m. that everyone's kind of fighting for. They're still fighting for it. Everyone's fighting. There's hundreds of millions of dollars put into advertising to fight for 1 hour of a Netflix show, special, or primetime slot. But most people don't sit on their couch anymore. Like we got DVRs in like the 90s, and we still now, like everyone will watch an hour show, but I think, most of us are busy. We probably can watch one show a day. So we have 1 hour a day. What about the other 23 hours? So what we found is you can take all of the 5 to 15 seconds distributed out throughout the day that people just have while they're not doing anything. All of that, it's all the gaps between while people are doing things, and you have hours of time that don't compete with anyone in the primetime space. So why aren't content producers producing content for all the gaps when they can, on aggregate, serve 4 or 5 hours of content a day versus the 1 hour that everyone else in the world is competing for? And that's what you see with Vine. Was they were smart about noticing that. You see Facebook videos are an average of 15 seconds. Everyone's is kind of subconsciously focusing on short-form content because they know they're going to get more viewership over time than competing with a Netflix special. So you will start seeing a lot of companies coming into the space trying to own short-form entertainment or be another, there will be parallels of all of Hollywood in the short-form entertainment space coming soon to a TV or phone near you.
And so where do you think that leaves the future of TV and long-form content? Do you think there's going to be a home for both, and how do you see the consumption of short versus long-form content playing out?
Well, I think it's kind of like what happens now. Primarily, most of my content is consumed short form. I don't have, you can say that, the younger generations don't have attention spans. I think the average attention span now is 12 seconds. No one wants to read. No one to sit on my couch and actually watch TV. And I think most of the people here are like me. That's a lot of work. That it better be like Westworld or something amazing, because I'm not going to watch something I'm going to watch it on my computer, on my phone. And in that world where it's my phone or computer, the content has to get shorter and shorter. Because sitting in front of your computer for an hour gets kind of tiring. Like holding your phone like this for an hour is like super tiring. So if we can the content will get shorter and shorter because that's the amount of time that we have to do things. It's the time of a scroll. It's the time to go. Right now, everyone has nothing, if you're like me, you get bored, and then you click and you just get clickbaited into stuff because you only really have 10 seconds. You don't really know what to do with it because you can't watch a 1.5-minute YouTube video. It's too long. You don't really want to read a 5-minute long article, so you're kind of just clicking on these one-line things or looking at tweets or Instagram feeds. Once we get high-end content coming in that way, then I'll start watching what is the 15-second version of Westworld? What is that small micro-entertainment that people are producing? And I think that's, as the world goes more mobile and more off the couch, unless you're sick with the flu and have to watch 12 episodes back to back, or you're just super bored, it will go towards shorter and shorter content forms.
My view is maybe a little bit different. I do 100% agree with that on one side of the spectrum. I do think that will absolutely be the case, and we're already seeing it, and it's sort of playing out over time. But I also think there is something interesting to be said sort of for how things are, the bifurcation of the way that things are going, like Alex mentioned, sort of Westworld and some of the very popular sort of longer form TV shows. Like, when people look at those today, they think of them not so much as TV shows, but they're almost just like really long episodic movies. And they're sort of, in a way, that's also to the trend of like, what if you could make a great piece of content, a great sort of cinematic piece of content that's, instead of being 2 hours long, is sort of like 20 or 30 hours long, but you cut it up into little segments so it's easier to watch that way. And so I think that there's those two sort of trends going on that seem totally different, but in a way are the same type of idea of getting a great sort of basis of content and being able to chop that up into something that's more easily to parse for an audience. And so Giffy obviously at one extreme, sort of doing the very short form. In a way, Netflix, HBO, those guys are sort of cutting up what is great, really long form content. And I think then eventually that will still trickle down to get into what Alex was talking about with shorter and shorter.
Oh, totally agree. I think if you have 24, like the perfect media consumer is someone that like watches 24 hours of media a day, right? And so you can't by physical attention span and like the need to eat for some people, you can't sit for 24 hours a day and watch a movie, except that I think there's a weird Danish film that goes like 24 hours, which is a little crazy. But if you could do that, like how would you divide the media? You'd have like a couple like 2-hour segments, probably a few 1-hour ones, and then a couple half-hour ones and 50 ones, and then you'd have a bunch of really tiny ones. So if you filled an entire 24-hour programming schedule, you would have to have the Westworlds, things that you would have the motivation to sit and watch, but then there'd be a lot of other stuff during the day that you don't really have the attention span to watch fully. It's like while you're hanging out or driving, which my Uber driver was watching TV while we were driving. That was crazy. Like, wait, what's going on? I think it was like American Idol too, which is like a weird thing to watch while you're driving. Anyway.
And on so many social apps and platforms, we see a shift moving away from text towards visual communication and sharing. Does that shift concern you at all? And do you think that we're losing any nuance in communication through, in many cases, a shift from text to visual formats?
I mean, I'll answer this slightly for you, and you can go off of it. But I do think like there's a very interesting element of Giffy, including sort of talking about the Slack integration, where you can sort of overlay text easily on top of various GIFs. And I do think like from the beginning of Giffy, I think you guys have been good about sort of doing the transcribing and figuring out what is actually being said sort of in clips that you're cutting up. And so I do think like there is an element to it where there is still the text part of it that is sort of important depending on what the content actually is. But I do think, I think sort of going forward, they just augment one another. I don't think like it's one that replaces the other necessarily. It's just that the sort of previous technologies that we've all lived through just weren't conducive with the networks and sort of the different tools that we had to sort of doing more things that would require a bit more bandwidth than just text.
Yeah. No, I totally. The one thing on the side, which is kind of cool about the captions, we just launched this an entire vocabulary set of sign language GIFs. I don't know if you've seen it on the internet, but it has text and signs, and it's an easy way to take a visual expression and tie it to a word. So I just learned like this is trapezoid, which was the first word that came up in the sign language dictionary. You should check it out. But I agree with MG. We're not against writing. Writing actually is just GIFs and moving images are just a superset of writing. So to explain that is, what we've done in the world, and this is 100% because of technology, we've taken everything in the world that we see right now, and we've transcoded it into black and white abstract words on white paper. And then we're expecting someone else, when we give it to them, to decode that back into this whole thing. It's like a weird lossy kind of, like, you thought GIFs were lossy. Like, this is totally like a lossy like transcoding system. It's not the most effective at describing anything. There are some beauties, like, there's a lot of artwork and a lot of subtlety that you can put into that transcoding, just like any kind of GIF work or any kind of lossy kind of work. But as an actual transcoding, like encoding format, text, black and white words on on text isn't really the most efficient way to convey information. So you take black and white on paper, now add some color, now add pictures, then now add function of time, which never existed in writing, and you now just have a superset of writing. So you can, in the base level, a lot of GIFs that we have are just words. People will just write captions, and then they'll flip through. People are making flip cards and other kinds of experiments with just words. People are now doing speed reading with GIFs. Well, you can put a bunch of words on a GIF, and then it'll just keep up pace. It's kind of like a lot of the apps you see that keep pace with your reading. So in that sense, like, it is just text is just a subset. We want to, our mission is to let everyone express themselves in all possible ways, and video is, and GIFs are really the evolution of all of that. But you can always read too. Nothing's wrong with reading.
And Giffy has been working on content deals, and I know you've also started monetizing recently. Could you talk a little bit about what types of content deals Giffy has been exploring and working on, why it makes sense for your company, and then also a little bit about how you're approaching monetization right now?
Yeah, so a lot of people, we don't talk about the monetization as much right now. But we are monetizing, so like people are saying, "Oh, you don't make revenue," but we do make revenue. We don't make a lot of it yet. We have a lot of the things we do. So we do a few different things. Right now we serve 2+ billion GIFs a day. We're doing massive amounts of traffic. I think we're about at like 150 million unique people a day that we can hit, which is pretty like. It's kind of like it's a pretty large proportion of Snapchat's traffic if you think about it that way. So we do a bunch of different deals. We do content deals to just get content into the system. For example, all the sports leagues, all the live events we do. We just launched every GIF from Workaholics. So we do mass catalogs of things. So we did that with, like, the Gilmore Girls came out with Netflix. We took every possible GIF ever made of every season and episode of the Gilmore Girls, and we chopped it up. And we have some tools. We did it in 2 days, and it auto-generates all this content. So we're making deals where we have blanket deals to take entire libraries and bring them into the database so that people can find these and express themselves in different ways, or just kind of be entertained. So pretty much every Netflix show we have as GIF form. We also have a studio in LA that does, this is very similar to the Vice model, that makes money right now producing high-end content for brands. So some of our big clients will come in and say, we need GIFs for this kind of campaign, or this. It's basically our GIF agency that helps generate a lot of these live events, but as well, we have a staff of creative artists and video editors that make content. So we go everywhere from, our model is anywhere from content creation all the way to the distribution, to the search, to just the pure entertainment value of the content that we put in. So, and I guess on the revenue side, you can think of us, if you think about what are the revenue models that, Vice makes their money off of creating content, Mike.com makes their money off of sponsored pages and having content there. We can do that. We do that in some cases. If you think about the Google model, it's just paid search. We haven't been doing that yet, but that's a very easy thing when we're doing billions of searches a day. So the revenue streams are pretty easy. We're just trying to avoid, one thing that we're trying to do is, like Ev Williams said this about Medium, is we know we can get people to click on GIFs all day. We just throw some cats and some other things, but we want to get out of that clickbait kind of ad revenue generating system. And we think that GIFs can kind of be, like, it is the one case that we've seen online where the medium really is the message. People are looking to find branded GIFs from the NFL, from our partners. Like our NFL, like we said, the NFL GIFs from, or the NBA, for example. The NBA, we did the All-Stars game, and the All-Stars game got 275 million views just during the game off of the GIFs. And all of that content is branded NBA and also all their sponsors inside it. So there's never really been, a case digitally where people find brands like Taco Bell and McDonald's, find their GIFs and send it to their friends describing how they feel about things. The only time you really see that is in fashion, when people wear like Abercrombie and Fitch or Nike shoes, and they go and pay people to show these brands off. You're wearing billboards all over your body. And GIFs, you're taking these billboards and you're pulling them off of our site from our brands where you're just taking advertising. It's like every GIF is kind of like a Super Bowl commercial, and then they're sending it onto messaging. So if we can get to a world that monetizes off of the intent of people actually wanting to be affiliated with your brand because your brand is cool and it expresses themselves in a certain way. For example, we did a campaign with H&R Block. No one, this is a joke, like no one would wear an H&R Block t-shirt unless you work at H&R Block. Some of you do, sorry. H&R Block is actually pretty cool. Their studio made a bunch of Make It Rain GIFs for Tax Day. And people, they had tens of millions of views and people sending these Make It Rain GIFs. And for a day, H&R Block was really cool. Like that really can't be done anywhere else.
And Alex, you mentioned Medium, and Medium recently announced that it's shifting away from an advertising-based platform to subscription models. MG, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think about the future of advertising and monetizing content broadly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, right. So a lot of what Alex hit on, I think, is right on. It's so first of all, the move away from the race to the bottom in terms of advertising, and I think the past several years we've all sort of experienced that play out at a wide scale of people doing a lot of clickbait things, and that gave way to things like the rise of fake news and all of this other stuff that's currently happening right now. And we're all sort of looking around and figuring out like what is going on and how do we actually solve this? Is there a way to do it? It's not putting the genie back in the bottle because that's not going to happen. But so what do we do to sort of go forward? And I think honestly, I do think it is a lot of experimentation, trying to figure out if there is a way, because at the end of the day, people want and have a desire to get access to content. And so it's figuring out how you can build a sustainable model in order to do that across a wide spectrum of different types of formats. Because we're not just going to stop reading, we're not going to stop watching video content, we're not going to stop sort of using all these things simply because the models don't work. People, if they had to stop sort of producing them, that just wouldn't be a tenable situation. And so the jury is very much out on a lot of these things in terms of what the model will be going forward. But companies like Giffy, have a lot of very talented, very creative people working on various different products to be able to sort of figure out how to monetize various different types of content going forward. And like Alex said, I mean, when you have the attention, that's what really matters, the attention of the users, because we all have this set 24-hour period in a day that we're all going to be figuring out what it is that we want to do. And very few companies actually get to the point where they have a meaningful amount of attention. And those are the companies that are going to have to and will be able to, because I believe that we're not just going to stop sort of reading and stop watching content in order to figure out what it is going forward.
Alex, you've had years of experience working as a founder of many different startups, and MG, you're also immersed in the startup world. For all of the people in the audience who are entrepreneurs or working at a young company, what would be a piece of advice you might have for them plotting their kind of path forward?
Oh, you leave this to me?
You're the VC.
Mr. Talkative now, all of a sudden
they're the ones that are going to ask you for money.
Yeah. My advice is, my advice coming from the world where I come from the world you're in, on the writing side of things. It's really as obvious as sort of staying on top of what it is that's going on, sort of trend-wise. And when you're trying to figure out, what it is that you're interested, whether it's starting a company, whether it's writing about things, whether it's investing in things, this stuff changes so quickly that you really have to be on top of it, sort of living and breathing within this world on a daily basis. And in some cases, that's incredibly frustrating, and it's also hard to pull off because it can be suffocating, especially in the era in which we currently live, where everything is just inbound. Every feed you get is Trump, 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 and all this kind of stuff. But you have to sort of be able to look beyond that and see what's actually, what's happening under the surface, and if there's anything to sort of tap into in terms of startup world. And you, Alex?
Oh yeah. you gotta know these guys to ask them for money so you can actually work on things. But one thing that I learned is ideas are super cheap. Like everyone has the same idea, and there's 100 people, and there's probably a Y Combinator company building whatever idea you have, and they're going to do it better. Just know that the idea, it's never about the idea. It's always about the execution. So if you have an idea and you think and it's good, like people say, hey, I had that idea. Well, you had that idea, but you need to execute on it. So if you can execute on any idea, it's like people, when we started Giffy, it was like, oh, GIF company. That's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. And they're like, you're going to make a company off of this? We're like, yeah. And they're like, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. You should have saw like all of our initial pitches. They were like, what? Like, one, we don't know what you're doing. And two, that sounds like the worst idea ever. But it really is about execution. And once, if you can execute and you have a plan and you have vision and you can do it, then, like after like 4 years, you have, you're serving billions of GIFs everywhere, and now you have one of the largest mobile media distribution platforms in the world. That's kind of crazy. Like, it just came from a really bad idea, but a really good execution. It was a good idea.
Thank you.